Okay, Shalom Aleichem everybody. Welcome to Beis Habechirah Ubon 770 in the heat of summer. We're learning Beis Habechirah. We're learning Mishnah Torah Rambam Hilchas Beis Habechirah based on a Takana Dreb. I'm walking to 770 and I have on my phone a WhatsApp group called Farbrengen. So I opened it and I tuned into the first Sikha. It's from Tovshan Lamed Vav from 44 years ago. Apparently that was the year that the Rebbe made the campaign of learning about Beis HaMikdash. So it was very fortuitous. The Rebbe is talking with a lot of emphasis, a lot of koch. The idea that when you learn about the Beis HaMikdash, it's not just ki'ilu, but it's actually building the Beis HaMikdash itself. Now, we did the Mizbeach. We have just a couple of halachas left. You have Tezayin, Yud Zayin, and Yud Chas. Now, I gave you the pictures. Because why not? And I gave you the pictures. You can take them home as souvenirs. But we should finish this quickly and move on to the Menorah, which I'm hoping to do today. Tezayin. Page Mem Gimel. Peirik, Beis, Halacha Tezayin. Page Mem Gimel. Halacha Tezayin. 3 lines on the top of the page. Kisheboinin HaMizbeach. When they built the Mizbeach, says the Heilige Rambam, Boinin Oise Kula Yotam. The entire thing was solid. Otam means verstoppt. There was no air. There was no cavities inside. Kimin Amud, as if it was a column of stone. Now it was a massive platform that was unbelievably heavy. We did the math. 32 amis is over 50 feet by 50 feet by 15 or 16 feet high of solid stone. It was an incredibly large platform of solid rock and a cement mix, as you'll see momentarily. There's no hollow, there's no empty spaces inside it all. Ella, but rather, maybe Avanim Shleimis Gedels, they brought whole stones that were big. Now I just want to remind you that in Peirik Aleph, the Rambam mentioned that Mizbach Avonim is Choivo. In Peirik Aleph, Halacha Yud Gimel. The Mizbeach had to be made from Binyan Gozis, Binyan Avonim Gozis. And it had to be large stones. So here the Rambam qualifies it, and he says like this. Maybe Avonim Shleimis Gedels, they brought large stones that were whole, uktanis, and smaller stones like pebbles or rocks. Or maybe sid is called plaster, I think sid is lime. Vizefis is plaster. And kunya is another kind of Zephys is tar, right? What did I say? No, Zephys is tar. Kunya, I forgot what kunya is. I don't know what kunya is. Umemacha, you mixed it all together. V'sheifech l'toich malbin gadol, you poured it into a great mold. Kimidase, according to its measure. Ubayna ve'ela, and you would gradually build and go. So basically, they would do what you see by work sites. They would build a wood frame. They'd pour a cement. But the cement had in it large rocks also, not just little ones. Big ones and little ones. So I suppose the reality was they put these big rocks in, and then they filled in all the spaces in between with this mixture, which was pebbles and these three different types of cement. Yeah, seed and zephes and kunya. The Mizbeach had to be absolutely smooth. And that's how they made it. Now, as I described it to you the other day, if you can imagine the Mizbeach as a birthday cake, which is layered. The widest layer is on the bottom, and then there's a narrower layer, and then a narrow layer, and then a narrow layer still. So it was built in pieces. They built the frame for the Yesod. The Yesod was 5 tefachim high, and it was 32 amas by 32 amas. But remember, one corner didn't have a Yesod. So it wasn't a perfect square. We talked about this yesterday, and you could see it in this picture on the floor plan that the Yesod is only on 2 sides. So they built the frame, 32 amas by 32 amas, and then inside that frame they put another frame so that there should be an empty amma in the east and in the south. Yeah? Inside the mold they would put guf shalet, a mold within a mold, a shalevan or stone. In the southeastern corner, according to the measure of the Yesod, so that the Mizbeach would not be a perfect square. The bottom of the Mizbeach was 32 amis On the west, 32 amis on the north, but only 31 amis on the east and 31 amis on the south, because there was no yesod in that corner. So they made a mold 32 by 32, and then they made a second mold inside to prevent the cement from pouring into that one amma. And then of course they would build up another platform, and each corner they would put another mold, until they would finish making the entire mizbeach. Then they took away the molds inside this structure, so that the southeastern corner would remain without a foundation. And the horns on top were made to be hollow. And I don't know how they did that, but on top of the mizbeach had these little kronis. They were 5 tefachim high, and 6 tefachim east to west, and 6 tefachim north to south, and they were meant to be hollow. So I guess they made a frame, and then they made a second frame, and they poured cement all around, and I don't know how they got the wood out. They had to somehow make it hollow. It had a top, unless the kronis were open on top. I don't know. Halacha Yud Zayin. Arba kronis shel mizbeach. Now the Rambam says this. We discussed over the course of 3 classes, I think, or 2 classes. Today's Monday. Over the course of, this is our 3rd class of the Mizbeach. Over the course of 2 classes, a whole bunch of details about the Mizbeach. How tall it was, and there was 2 types of amas, and there was a chota sikra, and 3 kvashim, all the details. Now that Rambam says, what if you don't make the Mizbeach perfect? So there is what you would call in halachic terms, le'ikuva. Le'ikuva means if you didn't make the Mizbeach perfectly, if certain things are there, it's kosher, and if certain things are missing, it's pashat pasal. Here we go. Arba kronos shel mizbeach, the 4 horns on top of the mizbeach, v'yesayda and the foundation, v'rebua and the fact that it is square, ma'akvin. Ma'akvin means they must be. Those 3 details have to be. If you make the mizbeach square, and you make the mizbeach with a foundation, and you make the mizbeach with 4 horns, kosher. It doesn't matter what size. Even if you made it the wrong size and the wrong shape, if you have those requisites, it's kosher. V'chol mizbeach any mizbeach she'ein lekeren yisoid kevesh v'ribua. Here the Rambam adds a 4th thing that he didn't say before. In addition to the 3 things he said before, the horns, the foundation, and the cube, the square, you also have a ramp. Harehu pasal. Then it's pasal. Sharbaton ma'akvim. These 4 things would render the mizbeach pasal, even as they call it in halacha, b'di'evet. Aval, however, midas arkei, or midas rachpei, or midas kimasa, if you made it the wrong length, if you made it the wrong width, if you made it the wrong height, as long as it's square, eina ma'akvim, it doesn't matter that much. V'hu, but, shalayivches me'amal amma b'rum shalosh. It shouldn't be more than a minimum size. The minimum size is tiny. An amma is 19.5 inches by 3 amas. Why? Says the Rambam, Kishir Mekei Mahamarocha Shal Mizbeach HaMidbar, because that was the shear, that was the measure of the area where the fire was burning in the Mizbeach that they had in the Mishkan. It was an amma by 3 amas. Shai. So there is a preferred way to make the Mizbeach, and as I discussed with you yesterday and also on Wednesday last, that the Mizbeach is the only part of the second Beis HaMikdash which was actually made like the Mizbeach of the third Beis HaMikdash, because that part of the Yecheskel we're able to understand. But b'di'evet it's kosher as long as you have these 4 requirements. Halach Yudches Mizbeach shenifkam mibinyani. Part of the structure becomes chipped. Not the stones, but the cement. Im nifkam mibinyani tefach. If the amount of chipping is a whole tefach, pasal. The whole Mizbeach is pasal. Pachas mi tefach, if less than a tefach is chipped, kosher, it's kosher. Make sure there are no chipped stones. Now, if you were a scholar, you would be scratching your head and saying, I don't understand. If you go back to Perek Aleph, and I'm not going to make you crazy about this, the Rambam writes in Perek Aleph, Halacha Tezvav, Avnei Heichel v'Azaros Shnifkemu. Okay, let me see if I can find it. Habayne Evan Pogum in the Mizbeach is Ever Ba'aseh. Kol Evan Shnaga Ba'barzel is Pasal Mizbeach, yeah? Evan Shenifkeba Shnaga Ba'barzel Achnu Mizbeach has to be removed. Psula V'ashak Sheres. There's 2 different halachas. One halacha that I'm bringing the Perek Aleph. The second halacha that I'm bringing the Perek Beis. Why the Rambam divides it this way, I don't know. In Perek Av, the Rambam sort of gave us the basic halachas of the Beis Hamikdash. Starting with Perek Beis, he's speaking the specific halachas of the Beis Hamikdash. So in Perek Av, he said, any stone on the Mizbeach which has the slightest chip is possible. But it doesn't make the Mizbeach possible. It makes that stone possible. Here he's saying a different thing. Not the stones are possible, the cement is possible, the finish is possible. So then you have a shear. If it's less than a tefach, this is a tefach, 3 inches and a little bit, you can use the Mizbeach. If the chip is bigger than this, the whole Mizbeach is possible until it's repaired. But that has nothing to do with the stones. Stones is a mashu. It's 2 different dinim. The stones of the Mizbeach were not allowed to be chipped an iota. The binyan of the Mizbeach, which was made basically of a cement mix, it was kosher as long as the damage was less than a tefach. I can't hear you.
We didn't see the stones, it was plaster on top.
Okay, and it was not only plaster, it was actually painted. They used to paint the Mizbeach, they used to paint the base. Twice a year they painted the Mizbeach. Now Rabbi say, I'm giving you pictures. I'm in the picture business. I'm giving you pictures. We're starting pay the Gimel, okay? On one side you have Mizbeach, on the other side you have Shulchan. If we finish in a minute tonight, I will consider ourselves very good. How are we doing? Okay, Rabbi said we're starting Perek Gimel, yes? This is the Menorah. Perek Shlishi. Now again, I want to observe again, the Rebbe has this ha'ara in his Sichos. The Rambam describes every one of the kelim, he doesn't describe the Aron HaKodesh. Why? Why does the Rambam not tell us how you build an Aron? So the answer in Pshat is, because they never built another. There's only one Aron. The Menorah, they built replacements. They could become tamei. They could break. You could have more than one. And the same is true with the Shulchanes and the Mizbeches. The Aron HaKodesh is only one. So no point in writing the halachas of something that's forever. But the Rebbe has a different word. The Rebbe brings rayas. You'll see it in Perek Daled the Mitzvah Hashem, that the Aron is not considered a keli of the Beis Hamikdash. It's considered the Beis Hamikdash itself. It's in other words a different category than the other kelim. Here we go. Okay, hold on to your pictures, please. Hamenera mifureshe surasa b'teir. The way the Menorah is made is described explicitly in the Chumash. Now, what should happen is the Rambam would say, okay, it's described in the Chumash, let's move on to the next thing. No. The Rambam tells you what the Chumash says. Because when you learn Chumash, you need help, yeah? There's Rashi, and then there's Rambam. Arba Gviyim, there were 4 cups, Shnei Kafterim, 2 buttons, Ushnei Prachim, and 2 blossoms, 2 flowers, How you were B'knei HaMenorah, in the central pole of the Menorah. Shenema, that's written in the Pasuk, Uva Menorah, in the central beam of the Menorah was Arba Gviyim, there were 4 cups, Mishukadim, that means that they were designed decoratively, they had intricate designs on them. Kafterei Pracha, their buttons and their flowers. Kafterei Miyot Rabim Shnayim, the minimum of buttons is 2. And Pracha Loshen Rab Miyot Rabim Shnayim. Ve'eid Perach Shlishi, a 3rd flower, Hayasamach Lirecha, was near the foot of the Menorah, like it says at Yerecha Ad Pircha. Moidev Rabbi Sai. Looking at your picture, yeah? Looking at your picture. But I learned in Cheder, my Melamed who taught me the Mishkan, V'Kelev, had a gewaltige Geschmack in it. He had such a geschmack in it that I have a geschmack in it, literally 45 years on. Yeah, he had such a geschmack in Trumat Tzava. He used to make pictures. It was a whole deal. The Menorah is just this. The Menorah in Chumash is the central pole. These are called Knei HaMenorah. Yeah, Vasisa Menorah Zov Toir Mikshe V'Sech Yerecheha V'Kone V'Giviyeha. The Menorah means the middle one. So the Rambam starts off by saying what you had in this central pole. So he says you have 4 cups. Now, of course, in this picture you see the very, very famous Chiddush of the Rebbe, which I remember the Rebbe discussing it. The Rambam drew a picture of the Menorah. B'ksav Yad Kodshe. The Rambam drew a picture of the Menorah. And you see that the Rambam wasn't much of an artist, but he was very, very, very geometrical, very into straight lines. If you see the original, it doesn't look like this. The lines are very straight, but the details are off. The Rambam, you can see from the picture, he has a mind that's used to rectangles and squares and triangles, not circles and curves. And the Rambam made the cups upside down. All of them. There's 22 cups in the Menorah. Made every single one upside down. The cups, we know, were designed like this. I guess the English word is a beaker, yeah? It was wide at the top and narrow at the bottom. Now, of course, these kinds of cups usually have a leg or a stem. These cups are just the triangle without the stem, right? In the Mizbeach, they had such cups. Dafka without a stem. You know why? Because you couldn't put it down. Because blood, you didn't want to put down because blood would very quickly congeal. You had to hold it and you had to stir it until it went on the Beis Hamikdash. But here we're talking about the Menorah. The Rambam made every single cup upside down. Now, where did this picture come from? The Rambam lived well over 850 years ago. I remember when the Rebbe celebrated over 30 years ago the 850th birthday of the Rambam. In Kahir, in Cairo, where the Rambam lived, there's a Geniza, a Shemus. But the Geniza in Kahir was never emptied. It's 1,000 years worth of Kisvei Yad, of manuscripts, going back 500 years before the printing press. And they found in the Geniza in Kahir some of the most important ksavim from Goinim. It's unbelievable what they found. And they found the Rambam's own Kisvei Yad Kodesh. How do you know it's the Rambam's Kisvei Yad Kodesh? Because you see a man writing Rambam and correcting it, crossing it out and writing different words. You could see clearly that whoever wrote this was writing his own text. And we know today that this is Ksav Yad Kodesh HaRambam. Could you imagine? They found it in a Shemus box that's been sitting in a shul literally for 1,000 years. They found the original Ksav Yad Kodesh of the Rambam. It wasn't connected to the Rambam, the Mishnah Torah. The Rambam didn't put this picture in the Mishnah Torah. The Rambam put this picture in this Pirush HaMishnah, this commentary on Mishnah, which was written actually in Arabic. It wasn't even written in Hebrew. It was translated from Arabic into Hebrew. There's a Jew who's now gone maybe 15 years, maybe 20 years. His name was Rabbi Yosef Kapach, Harav Yosef Kapach. He was a Jew from Yemen, Taman. He was a genius. He was a Emes HaChochem. He was a real Gaon. And he had a knowledge in old Arabic. I don't know anything about Arabic, but apparently there's old Arabic and there's new Arabic. Ubamela, his Zayda was a big maven. In the Arabic, which the Rambam, the dialect of Arabic that the Rambam wrote, and he retranslated all of the Rambam's Sfarim. And the Rebbe held very highly of his Targumim. Even though we had the Targumim that were written during the Rambam's lifetime, that the Rambam himself endorsed, 800 years later, a Yiddeleh comes along, retranslates the Rambam from the Arabic, and the Rebbe says you could see that in many aspects, the modern Targum is more precise, and it answers 1,001 questions than the Targum which the Rambam himself saw and endorsed. In that Pirush HaMishnah, he printed this picture. He took a facsimile of the Ksav Yad Kodesh Rambam and printed it. And you see how it goes. The lines are very straight, but they're not proportionate. They get stuck, and it doesn't look as pretty as this, but it's poshet the Rambam's own image. And of course, the first striking chiddush is that the poles are in a diagonal line. They're not in a curve. They're not like a rainbow. They're in a diagonal line. And of course, nobody in the world ever made a Menorah like this. Everybody made it curved. We were growing up, all the Menorahs were curved. There was no such thing on the diagonal line. Why not? You know the reason? Because of Shar Titus. There's the arch of Titus, of Titus, who was a Rosh Shemerush, who conquered Yerushalayim and destroyed the Beis Hamikdash, and he brought back plunder, as was the tradition in ancient Rome, and he used some of his wealth to build a monument for himself, which stands ad hayem hazeh. 2,000 years later, the Shar Titus, a huge arch in Rome called the Arch of Titus. I remember when I was a kid in the 1970s, as a child, we had a picture in a magazine of the Shar Titus. It's very tall. It's like the Grand Army Plaza. It's very, very large. A Yidel climbed up and he sprayed on Am Yisrael Chai. They cleaned off the graffiti. And I was a child when I saw it. But can you imagine, you tell one of the Roman legionnaires, one day, one of these is going to climb up on this arch and spray on Am Yisrael Chai, and there's not going to be a legionnaire for thousands of years to stop him. You know, who would have thunk? And but Titus built an arch, and on the top of the arch he depicts the carrying of the spoils of the Beis Hamikdash, and there's a Meneda in that image. Now the striking problem with that Meneda is it only has 5 arms, it doesn't have 7 arms, and it's not straight on the top. There's all kinds of different anomalies, but everybody assumed that was an image of the Meneda that was used in the Beis Hamikdash. And that's why for 2,000 years people made the arms of Meneda curved. Comes again that Rambam HaKodesh, and it makes them ba'alachsen like this here. When the Pirush HaMishnayos that Rambam was printed well over 50 years ago, between 50 and 60 years ago, people saw it, nobody took it seriously. And in Tafshim Mem Beis, 1982, the Rebbe said, excuse me, we found the original manuscript of the Rambam. The Rambam did not make the poles of the Meneda like this here, he made them on an angle. Oh no, what is it called? It's not a 45 degree, it's a 45 degree angle, I guess you would call it. Yeah, whatever it is. And since then, the Rebbe made a big shturim that the Meneda should be made, the Menedas for Chanukah should be made with such an angle. But the second anomaly is he made the cups upside down, all of them. They're upside down triangles. And the Rebbe was masber al pi Chasidus, that just like we know that the windows of the Beis HaMikdash were made inside out, right? You learned this and we all know this. The windows, when you make a window, when you have a wall that's as thick as this room, you have a wall, yeah, and you want to bring sunlight in, there's only one way to do it. The wall on the outside has to be wider than the wall on the inside, so the sunlight travels through the space without being blocked. The Beis HaMikdash windows were backwards. It was wide on the inside, narrow on the outside, so virtually no sunlight actually got into the Beis HaMikdash interior. Kol Chalenos Shkufim Atumim, backwards, to teach us that it's not the Mishkan needing the Oyer HaShemesh, need the light of the sun, but rather Misham Eire Yetze L'Chol Ha'elam Kulei, the light of the Beis HaMikdash radiates to the whole world. Says the Rebbe, just like the windows are backwards, the cups are upside down, to indicate that from the Beis HaMikdash, Gistmen, the Beis HaMikdash isn't collecting, the Beis HaMikdash is pouring. Now, where the Rambam took this from, nobody knows. The Alach saying the angle, it says Bestam in Sfara before, it says in Midrashim, but the idea that the Rambam made a picture, and he made all 22 of these beakers, these goblets, upside down. I don't know from Van the Rambam took Genumen how the Rambam knew it, but this is something that the Rebbe spoke about, and he made a big deal out of it. Anyway, getting back to our picture. This pole has 4 cups, 2 buttons, and 2 plus 1 flowers, which is 3. I'm going to show you where they are. Over here you have 1, 2, 3 cups upside down, and here you have a 4th cup upside down. Buttons, here's 1 button, and here's the 2nd button. These 3 buttons are bezun, they don't count them. Flowers, here's 1 flower, here is the 2nd flower, and here's the 3rd flower. You'll see later that Rambam is going to describe the brachim. So the central pole of the Meneda had 4 cups, 2 buttons, and you'll see later plus 3 more, and 3 flowers. Okay, now if you have nothing to say, I'm going to move on. You're welcome to ask me a question or make a comment. Otherwise, we're going to move on. I'm sorry. Look here. Here, and here. By the base. The very top.
This is considered a flower.
It was a flower. The picture is not exact. It was what they did was it was like
Where and how the oil was.
no, it was on top of it. There's something missing in this image. There was a flower. On top of the flower was something called a neir. A neir is actually what held the shemen. But the shemen is not the perach. The neir and the perach are 2 separate things. In this picture, the neir is not depicted. Mipnei Siba. Rav Yosef Kapach. Kuf Aleph Pei Ches. Kapach, yeah? Yeah, of course. Yeah, very lucid, very readable. Sure?
So why is anyone questioning? He translated it and we know that it's like that. So why does the world not?
So now they make two pictures.
But I'm saying the word Shemura recognized by us.
It's not Kapach, it's the Rambam.
No, but he's translated to
He didn't translate it. He took a picture. No translation. He took the image and printed it at the Zevi the Staten Gate. He didn't redo it. We redid it. Yeah. So the shaila is, the kasha is, that for hundreds of years, how come no Gadol B'Yisrael ever suggested it? My father tells me, I always learned Rashi, I never understood. Rashi says that the Knei HaManeda were Ba'alachsen. Rashi Chumash, Alachsen. It's one of those things. You know, so eingechazet the Greis. The Gemara says, keeping the dosh. When you get used to a mistake, it's impossible to unlearn. The Rebbe waited 25 years for somebody else to get credit for this chiddush before he spoke about it. The Beis Habechirah was printed in the early 60s, in the early mems. 20 years at least after Kapach printed a sefer. It's a mitzvah. It's in front of your nose, and it's a mitzvah. Well, the Chumash, it's hard to know. Rashi. The Chumash doesn't tell you what the color is. Rashi. I never researched it, but I don't know. I don't know of any one of the Rishonim who says it was round. Again, everybody relied on Shar Titus. It's just so interesting. Why you figure in Halacha there's something called Masiach Levitumei. Why would they make it wrong? They took the Meneda. You see them carrying the Meneda. Jewish slaves in chains carrying the Meneda on the shoulders. You can see it on top of the Shar Titus. You can go online, you can Google it. Why would they make it wrong? The teretz says it wasn't the Meneda of the Beis Hamikdash. It was a Meneda from some shul in Yerushalayim, or some rich man. You understand? It wasn't that Meneda. Halacha Beis. Shalosh raglayim hoyula. The Meneda had 3 legs. Okay, now I want you just to understand. The Meneda is 18 tefachim. 18 tefachim is 3 amas. Let's say it's 5 feet tall. It's probably this high. It's a pretty large menorah, okay, and it's top heavy. You understand? It's very, very well spread out. The leg on the bottom is very narrow, so from a perspective of gravity, it was very, very hard for this menorah not to topple over. Now, the only explanation you could give is that a lot of gold was put in this leg. They made this so heavy that this, even though it's very close to the ground, was the center of gravity. There's no other way to explain it. Because the arms extended, quite a bit away from the center. And it was 5 feet tall. It's a large piece of metal, with arms hanging around. So you have to assume, and I'm saying this as an assumption, that this base was very, very heavy, and this base had 3 legs, like a tripod. The legs were teeny little legelach, holding up a very solid, again, I'm assuming a very solid base of gold, and it allowed the weight to be close to the ground, and of course, because you have 3 legs, it wasn't teetering. It had a solid footing, if you will, and that's what kept them in understanding. And then the Rambam says, I'm sorry, I can't tell you for sure. But you have to assume. This is a tefach, 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 and this is 2 tefach. So you have to figure that this is removed from here 2 tefach, and this itself is a tefach, and this is another tefach, this is another tefach, another tefach. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 tefachim. 7 tefachim is like 7 tefachim is 2.5 feet. 2.5 feet in each direction. 2.5 feet in each direction of weight. And it's all supported by a central leg. And there were no streaked ropes, secret invisible cords keeping it in place, you understand? Okay, but I don't know for sure. We go on. There were 3 additional buttons in the central pole of the Meneda, from which the 6 branches radiated. 3 on this side, and 3 on this side. And of course, you all have your picture, so you can see this. Button 1, button 2, button 3, and the arms extend from the button, right, on either side. And then the Rambam continues. And in each one of these arms. Shloisha Gevim, there were 3 cups, which we now know were upside down. The kafta befedach, and a button and a flower. Okay? So, if you take a look at this picture, you have 6 arms plus a center. In each arm, you have 3 cups and a button and a flower, 3 cups, a button and a flower, 7 times over. Yes? And then he adds, Va'akel mishukadim. It was all made to be decorative with an intricate design, kameshkedim, like almonds, basayasim. Just like an almond is a nut that the shell isn't smooth, there's a lot of indentation. So the menorah was made beautiful. Now the Gemara says we're not sure whether the mishukadim goes on the gviyim or kaftereh or pracheha. The Rambam paskins that it goes on both. All the intricate components of the menorah were made, as they say in Yiddish, kinslich. There was a great expertise required to build a menorah, because besides the fact that it had to be made out of one piece of gold, it couldn't be soldered together. It was also made to be very decorative, very intricate, very, like an old leichter with all the little intricate designs. That's how the menorah was designed. And the Rambam says, "Lacha gimel nimtz kumtois sachak kol agvim shtayim ve'esrim." If you add it up, the menorah has 22 cups. Va'aprochem tisha, and there's 9 flowers. Va'akafteda machadasa, and the buttons are 11. I'll make you the cheshbon. Up here on top, you have 3 cups in each. 3 times 7 is 21. Plus 1 cup down here is 22. Up here on top, you have 7 buttons. Plus 3 is 10, plus 1 is 11. Up here on top, you have 7 flowers. Plus here and here is 9. So you have 22 and 11 and 9. 22 and 11 is 33, and 9 is 42, which apikabola is an important number. Says the Rambam, B'kulon ma'akven zeh, they all would make their others unfit. Afilu chaser echad min hashnayim v'arboim ma'akav eskulon. If one of these 42 is missing, it offsets them all. The impression that you sort of read between the lines, if you can only make 41 of these 2 designs, 41 of these 42 designs, better make 0. Because you either have them all or you don't have any of them. It has to be the way the Torah describes it. And by the way, these designs, the buttons, the flowers, and the cups, are not in Gemara and in Medish. They're befedish in Chumash. Hashem himself designs the menorah with these little details. This halacha, that the menorah has to be very, very intricate, and has to be very, very beautiful, and has to have a lot of detail, is only if you made it out of gold. Now we know, you know what we know from? We know from Pedek Aleph, Halacha Chaf. The last halacha in Pedek Aleph says, Ein Eisim Kol HaKelim B'Tchilasan. What am I saying? No, halacha Yitchas. Hameneira v'Keilev v'Shulchan v'Keilev v'Berach HaKtedes Kol Chashadas Ein Eisim Element HaMatechas. We know that the Kelim of the Beis Habechirah had to be made from metal. But it didn't have to be a precious metal. It could have been lead, it could have been copper, it could have been brass, it could have been iron. If they afforded, they made it out of gold. So the Rambam now says, this halach, that the menorah needs to have all these 42 different decorations. And these decorations are then further decorated by what's called mishukadim, is b'shasu azav, and the menorah is made out of gold. If they made the menorah of other kinds of metals, because they couldn't afford gold, or they didn't have gold, or the menorah became tamei, you don't make the design. No cups, no buttons, no flowers. Plain menorah. If it was made from another metal, you're not allowed to make these. And I believe that there's people who say that that's what happened in Chanukah. The menorah was tamei. They used the menorah from lead. The menorah was tamei, that they have 7 days for paraduma and so on. Moreover, when the menorah is made of gold, tiyakula kikar. The entire menorah has to be 1 kikar. A kikar is 3,000 coins. 3,000 coins. I don't know what the weight of a coin is, but 3,000 coins is a kikar. Im neidesah, with her neidas. You see the word im neidesah? That's what you asked me about. Im neidesah, it's the 4th line before the end of the narrow line, at the end of the line. In our picture, you don't see neides. Because neides means that above the flower there's another cup which was filled with oil. It's called the ner, the candelabra. And in this cup there was a wick, and there was fuel and so on.
So that we call it separate. It was not made from that mixture.
It's made from the same mixture,
But it's separate.
but it's not part of what the Torah describes.
It's not attached.
It was attached.
Oh, it is attached.
Absolutely.
Don't take it out.
No, it would have to be the same piece of mixture.
Oh, it is the mixture.
Yes,
Part of the mixture.
but it's not in this picture.
But it's not destroyed.
It's not. The Chumash mentions the Neder Seh. It doesn't Chumash the cups that hold the fuel. Right. 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 The Rebbe goes lanchish belaz in French. Lanchish. It means a candelabra. The cup. Oh, so here it's hard to see. I don't know in this picture B'chlal how you see. What do you see? Three Gviyim B'chlal. Okay. It was above the flour.
Within that
So my question was, is it the flour in the flour and there's like
piece of
milk
metal.
in it?
Right.
Or is there flour and milk
Within the space.
Okay, now. V'tiyeh kula miksha min hashates. They would beat out the menorah. Hashates means raw met gold. That had to be one piece. It takes a special kind of artisan to take a raw piece of gold and to beat it and to move the gold around in the kind of way that without using any soldering, without gluing pieces together, you can get a menorah. Chazal say that Moshe said it's impossible. So Abisha said, throw the gold into the fire, and the menorah came out. However, if you made the menorah from other kinds of metals, so ein makpid al mishkalo, we don't worry about the weight. If it was hollow, it's kosher. I think v'im ha'isach halula goes even if it was gold. It didn't have to be solid. It could even be hollow. I think, but I'm not sure. And again, I want to remind you. It says it says in submission that I'm wrong. If they made it out of other metals, it didn't have to be solid. I want to remind you that in my imagination, which of course is so important, just ask me, you have to assume that a lot of the weight of this gold was in the leg. You have to assume. Otherwise it would just topple over. Now, you don't make it out of chips, out of broken pieces of gold. Just one solid piece. Whether it's made of gold or other metals, because you don't want to make them made out of junk, out of, what do they call it today? Junk, what do they call it today? Scraps. You don't want to make it out of scraps. Okay, I guess I'll stop here. It's already 9 o'clock. I'm not going to finish anyway. So we'll continue tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem.